And I think for mom and dad, it was wisdom for them to be honest with us, but they also protected us in a way that it still felt like there was this adventure to be had. And I think that did have a lot to do with how we were praying as a family.
Family, I'm so happy today because I have such amazing, successful, talented guests today. And you know them by their music, but we want to talk today about something coming up super special. First off, I want to introduce Joel and Luke Smallbone. Guys, how are y'all doing today? Thank you for being here with Vida, Unida Radio.
Yeah, well, top of the morning to you. I have to say a couple of things just quickly. First of all, my wife is Hispanic, so she's still working on me with learning Spanish, but I feel right at home here. And then secondly, speaking of family, as you're about to share with the people, but I'd love to take the opportunity to introduce you to our mum here as well, our unsung hero, if you will.
That's so awesome. And that's what I was going. I want to talk about Helen Smallbone. Thank you for taking the time for being with us, because this is actually focused on you, the unsung hero, like Joel just mentioned. Helen, how are you doing? How do you feel about this amazing opportunity that the whole world is going to be able to see your story?
Oh, she loves this stuff.
The boys know me too well. My comfort place is not being in front of cameras or in front of microphones, but actually being back at home. So I'm definitely out of my comfort zone. However, I will say that I feel like this movie that we've been involved with and our story can encourage others on their journeys. And I think that's what the world's about, is being part of a bigger community and encouraging one another.
I love that because just like you said it, this is a story that can encourage a lot of families, mostly immigrants. I'm an immigrant myself, came from Mexico. Right. You guys came from Australia. And I know there is a lot of similarities when you come to a new country, when you come to the unknown. And I don't want to spoil the movie because I want to invite everybody to see it. But Helen, why don't you tell me a little bit of how can you encourage, first of all those moms that come with their families to a new place, out of their comfort zone, because that's something that we see in the movie, that you are coming to the struggle. It's the real world, because you could have everything, family, friends, and you're familiar to your place, and then you come to the unknown. How did you find hope, and how can you encourage the moms that are going through that to find hope?
Yeah, it isn't an easy thing, and we had one thing that was easier for us than Latino people coming here, immigrants coming here, and that we spoke the language to a degree. I mean, we still weren't understood at times, but at least we were all trying to speak English. But the accent sometimes makes it difficult to understand what we're really meaning. But it is hard because you're coming usually with not a lot of money. You're usually, which was our story, we had lost everything back in Australia. You're usually coming with a small amount of possessions. So you've actually gone through everything with a pretty fine-tooth comb, and you've pulled out the things that were the priority or the things that you felt were really needed. You have no family and friends, or very few. You're coming, even for us, we had no furniture in our house. We had no car. And in a lot of America, having no car, you just don't get around. There's no public transport. It's very difficult. Yeah. And if it wasn't for the community, the wider community in our street and in our local area, embracing us and supporting us, and if it wasn't for God to seek Him and make sense of what we were doing, it just would have been too hard. I think we would have had to pack up and go home, and we had nothing to go home to.
Wow. I love that you mentioned that, Helen, because like I said, a lot of immigrants that come to the United States get to a point where, okay, we're already here, but what are we going to do? We don't have anywhere to sit. We're just in the floor. What are we going to eat today? What are we going to eat tomorrow? We got to go and find the money and find a living. And it's hard to trust God in those moments. I mean, you want to do it, but it's hard. And guys, I want to ask you, because I know that being so little, being kids, watching your mom, watching all the struggle that they were going through to support a family and having faith on the middle of all that. How do you all remember those situations and knowing, we got to trust God just like mommy's doing?
Yeah. I think I would say this to a lot of folks who are coming over in similar circumstances, that I think that people struggle when you hear the story to think that you can be transparent as parents and tell kind of the kids about what's going on while also still protecting your kids and still making your kids feel secure. And I think that was our childhood. I was very aware that we were poor. I started mowing lawns when I was 5 years old, which is kind of hilarious to think about. But all the money that we would make would kind of go back into the family fund, would go into just kind of helping the family survive. But yet, for us, we still felt loved and protected. And so in some cases, though the circumstances were incredibly challenging, we still had a lot of fun. We still had adventure. And so I think that there is an ability to be honest with your kids, but also as long as if your kids are feeling loved and protected and safe inside the love of parents to kids, I still think you can have, there can be those things that take place that doesn't necessarily have to be this trauma years and years down the road. And I think for mom and dad, it was wisdom for them to be honest with us, but they also protected us in a way that it still felt like there was this adventure to be had. And I think that did have a lot to do with how we were praying as a family, because we were very honest about our needs. And man, kids find faith easier than adults.
That's awesome.
And so when you were actually confessing to God, saying, hey, I don't know where the next meal was going to come from, we just presumed that we would get taken care of. And then we were. And so that does nothing but fuel faith in who Jesus is. I think it was a wonderful thing for us as children.
I think, Erick, I want to comment on that, because I think sometimes as parents, we can see all the issues. We can see all the problems. We can see the bigger picture. Kids have that blind faith. And that's why I think the Bible says, come as a child, because a child just trusts their dad. The dad's going to be there. Their dad's going to provide, or it's just going to be there. And when David and I probably found some of our circumstances more overwhelming, a lot of times it was the kids who actually encouraged our faith in the fact that, Mum, don't worry, we'll have something to eat, or don't worry, that bill will be paid. Yeah. And it was the kids who encouraged us in our weakness.
That's awesome. And I guess that's why Jesus said, let the kids come to me, right? To keep encouraging that faith. And that's amazing, the responses, because I'm so sure that a lot of families are gonna relate to you and be like, wow, that's encouraging to hear that there is hope, that there is faith that we can grab on. And Helen, I just want to ask you, there is this amazing song by For King and Country, but it's also in the movie, part of the story, Burn the Ships. How do you decide it? And it's like, we're not going back. We're trusting God. And we know that even though it's in the middle of all these tough decisions, all this hard life right now, we're going to burn the ships and trust God.
It happened more organically, I think, in our circumstances. We didn't make a big decision that we were going to burn the ships, but my husband David had a business back in Australia, and he needed to go back a couple of times, and we actually traded in our return tickets in order for him to go back. So we burned the ships by removing our back door, by removing our ability to take flights to go home. But it wasn't us thinking we've got to make this work. We can't. There is no back door. But I think God had a plan in that, because some of our hardest times probably came after we had used those return tickets. And we're a family of 8 with me pregnant, so we're a family of 9. That is a lot of tickets to buy to go home. And I'm not sure we had many people who would have even been happy to help us on that road, to foot the bill. So I realized we had to take the next step. Now, some of those next steps were doing the menial tasks of house cleaning, of babysitting, of gardening, of lawn care, raking leaves. We had to take the next step. And it's interesting to me, Eric, because sometimes you can look at the next step and think, well, this is going to be useless. Like we don't want to do this job, or this isn't our area of expertise. But God doesn't waste anything. And in those years when we worked together as a family, and I mean, Luke said he was 5 and 6 mowing lawns. When we worked together as a family, and all of us would be there, our youngest, Luke's younger brother Josh was pushing our little girl Libby in a stroller, but we were all there.
Yeah.
And what it did was it made us rely so much on one another and on the dynamics of family that when their older sister Rebecca St. James got signed as Rebecca St. James, we couldn't separate. Like it was like we'd gotten so much strength from being together that we couldn't just have her go off with David and do her thing. So we all went. So the boys actually learnt to become road crew.
I love to hear that, and all about family and keeping the family together. And I think that's what us as immigrants coming to the States try to keep it. And talking about family, Joel, I know that you mentioned at the beginning, you're married to Mariah, who is a Mexican descendant. Tell me a little bit about this in your life, mixing a little bit with the Hispanic community. Has it been hard?
It is interesting, Eric. Even hearing Mum talk, I think there's a lot of cross connects between the Australian community and the Hispanic and Mexican community, in that, the hardest thing about leaving Australia was we had 24 cousins, and it was our aunts and uncles, our tias and tios, and I was our grandparents, it was our primos and primas, and stepping away from that was the hardest part. And yet, like Mum said, it allowed us to band together, if you will, and bond with each other as family, because we had no one else to turn to. Mariah, in similar fashion, she's first generation Mexican American. Her mom's first language is Spanish. Which was awesome. sort of funny because she often thinks in Spanish, so things can come out a bit backwards. But we've created our own little kind of world where they've moved to town now, and so I feel very much like there's this Australian Mexican or Mexican Australian tie-in. And even when we started working on the film, Mariah was involved and set together a prayer team every day, and she was on set and helped co-produce and all the rest of it. And there was this sense of like, this was important not only to our family, but it was important in some ways to Mariah's family as well, because it, in a small way, shape or form, it represented her grandparents' faith in stepping away. They worked at Levi's for 30 years, her grandparents. She just lost her grandmom. We lost her in October. And but they started a whole new life. Her grandpa gave up playing trumpet. He loved playing trumpet as a young man, but he gave up playing trumpet to build a better life for my wife, ultimately, for his daughter, which is my mother-in-law, and then in turn, my wife. And so I think that's part of what is so beautiful about telling such a personal story, is sometimes you have to go deeply personal to relate deeply to so many others. And I hope, Definitely. I hope this film has a way of not only reaching down to the Southern Hemisphere in Australia, but I hope it has a way of reaching to Central and South America as well. And that we're going to overdub it in Spanish, and that so many in your community can find themselves and find a bit of hope and faith and love through our story,
Love it. Love the whole story. And I know a lot of families are going to identify with you guys' story, with Helen's story. And I'm really grateful that you guys gave us the opportunity to talk a little bit about Unsung Hero. And just to finish up, why don't you just invite everybody to not miss this amazing story of the Smallbones and the struggles?
Yeah, so April 26th is when the film comes out. As we've said, originally born in Australia, came to America as young boys, and we struggled as a family, went through all sorts of unique circumstances. And yes, for anyone who is listening, come out, and hopefully you can, as they've kind of talked about, see yourselves in this movie, April 26th.
And bring your family too. You got Mother's Day, you got Father's Day, but we're dubbing April 26th Familia Day.
Hey,
So bring your family out to the theaters as well.
All the familia. And guys, we can wait to hear more of Spanish collabs in the future, like Miel San Marcos. We love Solo Dios.
Oh, yes.
Solo Dios Sabe.
So good.
It's the first time we've ever actually overdubbed a song in Spanish. And I will say, it was very difficult for us to do, I'm embarrassed to say.
Yeah, I think that I was so bad at Spanish. I had some folks working with us at the time that I had a version of me speaking and singing in Spanish, which was an absolute mind bender for me to do. So I have so much respect for you guys, especially you, Erick, as you speak English and Spanish. So bravo to you. But
Gracias.
I played it for some friends of ours who I was working with. And I was like, hey, man, I sung a song in Spanish. And they looked at me and they're like, you need to do better.
I was like, no comprende. No, and so as a result, in some ways, we were so grateful for Miel San Marcos to step in and offer their voices. The idea of someone singing this song, such an important song, in their heart language was so powerful. And then, as you just mentioned, in Houston, Texas, at the rodeo, that was the first time we've ever gotten to perform with them live.
That's awesome.
And I just thought, how cool to have, the better part of 60,000 people, a large portion of them being Spanish speakers and Hispanic.
That's right.
To be able to sing this song in their heart language was very profound. So more to come. At very least, speaking of my wife, she's working on a Latin country album, so you'll hear more about that. But it has certainly given Luke and I more thought in how do we continue to reach out and invite other folks from different languages and different communities to be part of what For King Country is about.
I love it. I can wait to hear more to come. And actually, if you can take a suggestion, I love shoulders. So you can record hombros. That's how you say it in Spanish.
Hombros.
I mean, I can say
hombros.
I can say that word, hombros. Yeah, I got this.
There we go. Thank you so much, guys. So excited about the
Thanks,
future.
Man.
Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you.
Well done, Erick.